My name is Jorge Preciado, and I am Assistant Professor of Teacher Education here in Seattle Pacific University. My areas of focus are in literacy and special education and positive behavior supports. Today, I will be talking to you about some instructional strategies that we can use in general with all students, but specifically if you also have students with disabilities in your classroom, specifically say learning disabilities. And so what are some things that we can do to support students that may require a little bit more support from us? So two things that you should always consider when you walk into the classroom, and you should be thinking about the physical structure of your classroom and also the instructional component of how you're going to teach for that particular day. I'll go ahead and address the instructional first, and then we can also discuss a little bit about the structure of the classroom. And so I will go ahead and discuss 9 principles, 9 big ideas regarding universal design, and what are some things that all of us should be looking at when we come into the classroom and we're ready to teach. And they are clear goals and objectives, review, engagement and participation, student understanding, providing models, independent practice, scaffolding assignments, vocabulary instruction, and structure of your role. And so with instructional design, one of the first things you want to do is make sure you have clear goals and objectives. And if you can write those out on the whiteboard, or if you're showing that in PowerPoint, that's great. The big idea is that the students know where is it that you are, what will be covered that particular day. The second thing is you want to go ahead and include some review in your instructional practices. And so as you are reviewing, basically you want to help the students with the purpose of that is just so that the students build fluency and build mastery of content that was previously taught. Once you've done your review, then you can go ahead and do your lecture. As you're doing your lecture, it's important that you have engagement from the students. And so it's just not enough. I mean, you have a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of information that you want to share with your students, but it's very important that the students are also engaged in the learning process. So as you are teaching, it's critical that you are also asking the students questions. And the questions can be done in multiple ways. It could either be in small group instruction, or basically you are just posing questions and you're asking students to respond to those questions. Or I know that in some classes, then you can use the cell phone, and the students are replying that way. The important thing is that the students are engaged, and basically they're just not sitting there and, well, you just go ahead and you're sharing all this information, but they're not really responding. It's critical also that when you respond, that the students also receive clear and immediate feedback. It's important that students know where are their responses, do their responses fall within a range of that is the correct response, or it's not the correct response. And you always want to, you're sort of being a shepherd, if you will, and you're guiding the instruction in a way that students are learning. And it's also important for checking for understanding. This is a good way of whether that informs you if the students actually either did the readings, or you need to go back and reteach some critical components, say from previous lectures, or not. Modeling, it's also a very good instructional practices. And modeling in the sense, for example, oftentimes there's a lot of vocabulary that that's also new to students, and so anytime that we can model what some of these vocabulary words are, just to enhance the learning of the students, is critical. So, for example, when you are looking at vocabulary instruction, it's always a good idea to write the word on the board. to provide a student-friendly definition, to provide some concrete examples of what that word is, and then to also put the word in context so that you can give students an opportunity to check and see if they truly understand what these words are. Especially important when, like I said, you're either teaching philosophy, or is it theology, or is it one of the sciences. There's a lot of complex vocabulary that's being thrown around, and let's not make the assumption that all the students are firm with that. Another thing that you can take a look at is the pre-teaching or teaching some of the prefixes or suffixes that go along with some of these words, specifically understanding that a lot of words that are scientific words come from Latin, and so again, it's just an opportunity for you to provide students with some feedback. Okay, scaffolding of instruction. Scaffolding of instruction is important, specifically when for assignments. And so oftentimes as you assign these assignments that at times can be pretty complex, and I'm just thinking about students with say disabilities, specifically students with learning disabilities, how some of these tasks can be a little bit overwhelming. And so when you scaffold assignments for a student, it's basically just taking an assignment and breaking it up into parts. So if it's a big science project, it's basically getting together with the student and having the student work towards that task, but instead of just giving you one big assignment, they're giving you multiple assignments that eventually will lead to the big assignment. And so when we scaffold assignments, we make it less overwhelming for the student. There's opportunities for the students to submit work, get some feedback, and then be able to make any changes. And so it really decreases the stress, if you will. The students are still responsible for the work, so it's not as if you are decreasing the level of difficulty of the task, because the task is still there. It's just the way that you are allowing a little bit more flexibility for students to turn in the assignment. I also mentioned about the component about looking at the physical structure of your classroom. And so it is important that specifically if you have students with, say, visual impairments, that they either are getting that they're seated somewhere that they are able to see if it is a PowerPoint lecture, or they may require for you to download the PowerPoint for them and just increase the font. When you're working with students with specific learning disabilities, as stated earlier, review is a critical thing. And so don't see this as a waste of time, specifically for students with specific learning disabilities who really benefit from review. And so by you reviewing, it's just a good instructional practice. It's just a good instructional practice that you're doing. The other thing is that you may have students with say, some physical challenges. And so how your classroom is set up, do you have enough space so that students can get in and out of their desk appropriately? And so do you also have, say, if it's a student with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, you probably want to make sure that that student is probably seated away from areas of distraction, whether it could be a window or a door. The big idea is that we definitely need to be inclusive. We definitely need to pay attention to some of the specific needs that our students require, and continue to support them as best as we can.